Okay, guys, we have the one that you have been waiting for. You are excited. It's the nomads, and let's get a little bit more deeper into some of these groups. Now, the nomads that we've been talking about, and so to understand by this time, again, the 600 to 1450 time period, the main nomads we have were in Central and South Asia, as well as some in Northern Africa, and then a smidge in Europe. For the most part, these people are pastoralists, and they have horses or cattle or camels, and they travel around from place to place. And the fact of the matter is they need things like tools and crafts and other types of practical goods that can help them survive. And so they're actually pretty good at trade and often trade with other groups, but they also have a tendency to try to get some stuff as well. Societal, the populations tend to be very small and they tend to be very clannish, and that everybody kind of comes together in family groups. Now, the problem with that is when you have kind of a clannish type thing, it often leads to a lot of fighting. And we often see that one of the reasons why these groups don't establish a ton of things is that they remain very divided. Societally, it's pretty equal. You know, as a nomad, you actually have to work together to survive. For the most part, there is a nobility class and everybody else. But a lot of times, the people who rule in the nobility class, they rule with the approval. So it's Democrat-ish. It's not like you vote for it, but people kind of approve the leader, and that leader has, for the most part, unilateral power. Of course, the Mongols, they are the most famous. They are awesome. It's a separate video. You're going to watch it later. Okay, moving on. However, there were some other people that would come after the Mongols, which is the next video that you're going to watch, that will kind of rule in their name. And one such one at this time was a man by the name of Timur, or Tamerlane, which is actually a different version of Timur the Lame. He actually had a hip and leg issue. He could not really walk, but if you put him on a horse, he could pretty much destroy everybody. Timur was from modern-day Uzbekistan, and he lived from 1333 to 1405. And he started to conquer a small area around the city of Samarkand, if you see it up here. And Timur basically made the decision that he was going to take his great army and conquer everybody. And that's kind of what he's going to do. He is going to destroy pretty much everyone. If I pop back up to the map, you see he's going to control land from modern-day Turkey through Iraq, okay, Iran, and into Afghanistan over here, Pakistan over here, and then even a little bit into India. He basically had the idea that he was going to destroy every city that was within 1,000 miles of him, and he absolutely did that. It was massive destruction and depopulation. But at the same time, he was a really interesting guy. He was very intelligent. He knew multiple languages like Turkic, Persian, and Mongolian. He was big on the arts. But then on the flip side, if you look at the picture on the bottom left over here, one time when he defeated the Turks, he captured their leader Bayezid and paraded him around his empire in an iron cage. It's believed he actually let him go home, but we're not exactly sure what happened to him. He will destroy the Byzantines and actually help get to their downfall, actually after taking some land from the Byzantines and wiping out a portion of their army. Within 50 years, the Byzantines will be conquered. Eventually, his great-grandson will actually conquer India under the Mughal Empire. And if you look on the right, this is actually a picture of a building in Samarkand. Very, very beautiful, because he was also big on the arts as well. I like to tell the story of his tomb because even after he was dead, this guy brought some damage. As you can see on the left is the outside of the tomb. On the right is his actual sarcophagus here. And there were Russian scientists or archaeologists in 1942. They were excavating his tomb in modern-day Uzbekistan. And when they opened the tomb, they found a inscription, and that inscription said, "Whoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." The next day, again, these were Russian scientists, Hitler invaded Russia under Operation Barbarossa, which was the largest invasion of all time. Now, of course, we know Hitler was unsuccessful, but a lot of Russians died, so maybe Tamerlane killed people, 630 years later. But this guy had incredible impact, had an empire of his own, and then of course you have the success of his grandson, oh sorry, of his great grandson later on to take over modern day India. Now, himself, Tamerlane, was actually a Turkic person, and the Turks are very, very interesting. They are a nomad group that actually started outside of modern day Mongolia, went into modern day China, then up over here into Russia, and then down through Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, right here, their stopping point. This is where Tamerlane's at, and then over in, of course, the area that is their name, the Turkey. Around the year 1000, they come into Byzantine held lands, and they have a lot of contact with Arabs, because if you see, they spent a lot of time right here, in which Muslims were very, very popular, and they are going to convert to Islam. And the first empire that was actually set up by these guys are the Seljuk Turks. Again, they initially will set up within the Abbasid Empire, but in the years like 1050, 1060, they will overthrow it and start the Seljuk Empire. And that would go from the year 1067 to 1194, founded by this guy down here, if you look at the mouse, Tughril Beg. And at its height, it was massive. As you can see here, the area. They initially settle here. Look, they drive into the Byzantines and take a big chunk of their land, and they'll conquer quite a bit of area, including the homeland of Islam, Medina and Mecca. Their big move was in 1071 when they were able to defeat the Byzantines at the Battle of Manzikert, which would really kind of start the slow decline of the Byzantines and the rise of the Turks really in power in the Middle East. Eventually, long term, they are going to fall. They will take pretty big hits from both the First and the Second Crusades, and they will actually be upended by a different group of Turks, the Ottomans, who I'll talk about later. And you can see here the Crusades of Europe. We'll be talking about them. This is the First through Fourth Crusades plus two other Crusades, and all of them were directly involved in lands controlled by the Turks, by the Seljuk Turks. Here's Manzikert up here when they won that, able to take a big chunk out of Byzantine land. But you know, you look here from 1096 really until 1270, fairly regular, and there's only so much time it's going to weaken you and then open them up to being overthrown. Now, they did achieve some pretty incredible things. Their government was very interesting, that they would use major families to run the provinces. So it wasn't really feudalism, but it was this idea of having the nobility help you out, which would be influential later on. They were really huge on art and literature. We have lots of architecture and building and tapestries and painting. And the other big thing is their foundation of universities. We talked about Muslim achievements throughout this time period already, and this area was really crucial. If you look here, Nizamiya University of Baghdad, this is the third oldest university in the world. It was founded in 1065 by the Seljuk Turks, and it will be and other universities will be founded by them. Actually, the top 5 oldest universities in the world, if I'm correct, are actually all Muslim universities. So the Turks really did achieve a lot. They really kind of establish, you know, they're the successors, if you will, to the Arabs in this area. And the guys that will take over after them will be the Ottoman Turks. They will take over in the year 1299, and they will run until 1919. This is pretty incredible. And their founder is this guy here with the super big hat. We know what John Green talks about hats, Osman II. And basically what Osman's going to do is conquer Anatolia. Again, Anatolia is modern-day Turkey. Really focus on spreading Islam. He takes the title of Sultan, which is kind of a religious and political leader as well. Now, they have definitely religious tolerance towards Jews and Christians. However, Jews had full rights and could actually rise up and have positions of fairly good influence here. But the Christians, definitely their rights were limited. There were lots of jobs that they couldn't do. It was kind of back to the time of the jizya tax and things along that line. So he was tolerant of the ideas of like pilgrims and keeping Jerusalem open, but it didn't mean that people had equal rights within the kingdom. Really, the big thing that the Ottomans would do is these are the guys that are going to take out the Byzantines. If you look at their expansion, okay, they start right here, okay, in this brown area, okay, that's what he will start with around the year 1300, okay, and then they're going to spread out to this in the orange, and then they are going to circle around and slowly take over what was left of the Byzantine Empire. And the biggest blow was in 1453 when Mehmed II conquers Constantinople. They renamed the city Istanbul. They changed Hagia Sophia into a mosque. And it just, they are the ones that finally end Rome. And again, that's pretty impressive, and we've talked about the length of Rome. But as you can see, all the way up to the 1500s, this was a huge empire, really about half of what Rome was. So, you know, you're going from Algeria all the way down into Iraq, down here in the Persian Gulf. Lots and lots of ability that these guys had, and a lot of achievements as well. And then we have, oh my goodness, the Vikings. Let's fly over here. The Vikings from Scandinavia. Okay, Scandinavia, we talk about Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Not Finland, even though it's called Finland today, but the Vikings weren't from Finland. And really, the deal about the Vikings, and most of you have heard of them, they're berserkers and they conquer people. Well, they had to because they just didn't have anything. Basically, they could kind of fish, and that was about it. They needed goods. The structure was clannish, but because they were such good fishermen, they are actually really good seafarers. And basically, the way they worked, they had a clan leader that would lead them on these journeys to go find food or other types of goods and gold. Eventually, you would get, they would have kings that we'll talk about that are able to achieve some really impressive things down the road, but these guys were really devastating with their ships. And as you can see here, a Viking longship, what makes them so powerful is that it's very long, but it's very shallow. Europe is full of shallow rivers, so there wasn't anywhere a Viking couldn't get to wreck you. The Viking really starts to expand in the year 799 when we have the first cataloged attack. It was on the island of Lindisfarne, which is just in northern England, and that's what's left, if you see, on this great monastery. And they come in and they just absolutely destroy everything. They are the Mongols, if you will, of Europe. They come in, no one can beat them. No one can stand toe-to-toe with them. They're not coming as occupiers. They come, they take what they want, and they leave. Now, eventually, this will change over time. The Vikings will decide to start to settle, which is really important with their later expeditions. As you can see here, they start in these really dark reddish-brown areas, and then, as we all well know, many of you do know that they did get to the New World under Leif Erikson. They do arrive at the New World. His dad, Eric the Red, was actually pretty much responsible for founding Iceland. Also, the settlements on Greenland, and the reason they called it Greenland because it was green. We'll talk about that later, but it was green. It wasn't called there to con people to settle there. Greenland was called Greenland because it was green. The thing about the Vikings under Leif Erikson here is, yes, they did come to the New World. Yes, they did occupy it for a little while, but they didn't do anything. They basically got pounced and destroyed by the natives, and they were actually driven out. Of all these groups, a lot of people think, the tribal groups in the Americas weren't, sophisticated enough. Well, they were. They were able to push them out. But as you can see, there wasn't anywhere they could go. And many of these areas they would settle, as I'll talk about. Their impact is huge. The Vikings were actually vital in ending feudalism, because what ended up happening is the Viking attacks got worse and they would exact tribute from people to not attack them. Countries started to form in response to this to try to, beat them. So they helped to end feudalism. One of the most famous group is the Normans that were settled in northern France. If I go back up here, the Normans right here. And of course, it's from the Norman line that you will get the kings of England that I will talk about later. So the successors of England are Vikings. If we go over here, if you look at the mouse, the Rus states, we said they were help respond to found Russia, and they helped to reignite trade because the Vikings could go anywhere. And that was really, really amazing that the Vikings were able to do that. And they helped to extend trade throughout Europe because after they started knocking everybody off and had their own kingdoms of their own, it realized like, hey, wait a minute, it makes more sense for me to, trade with you than destroy everything. So in the end, the nomads will kind of go from these groups that wreck and destroy everything, which they do, to actually becoming a group that is able to end feudalism and bring Europe into a more modern area. So these nomads are incredible. They do lots of really interesting things, and I hope you learned a lot. Let's get your comments and questions, and I'll see you tomorrow.